So I'm going to be very rude for a moment and look at my camera, but then I will be all yours. If I could just get your full name and where you worked in Salford.
So I'm David McKelvey. I've worked in Salford at the practice in Ordsall, GP practice in Ordsall, and I was also working with the Salford CCG board for a few years as well.
Perfect. Okay, that's all good. Okay, I'm going to stop recording and start again, but then that's all good. Okay.
All right.
Oh, you're looking. So if we start with you retired in March, and then in April you were in London protesting. What made you decide to go down there?
So I've been involved with Extinction Rebellion, and particularly Doctors for Extinction Rebellion, for a number of years now. And we were down in London, part of the main the Extinction Rebellion protest. So we'd been down there actually on the Friday evening. We'd been outside the Treasury. We had been protesting there because our government subsidises through various financial mechanisms, gives £10 billion a year to the fossil fuel industry. So £10 billion of our money is going to fund the fossil fuel industry, which is effectively the industry that is causing the damage because of climate change. So we were there protesting outside the Treasury. We were there for all day, and then the end of the day there was no arrests, no big drama. We were doing lots of outreach. We delivered letters to all the various departments, including the Treasury. And then we left peacefully at the end of the day, so that was all fine. So on Sunday there was a main march that Extinction Rebellion was doing through the city. So we joined that, and so in Doctors for Extinction Rebellion we've got nurses, physios, OTs, all sorts of people there, and we generally dress in scrubs to show that these protesters are not crusties, as Boris would try and have us say, or tofu-eating wokarati, as somebody else has called us, but we are normal people and we are professionals as well. So we were part of the main march. So the main march started about 2 o'clock, I think it was. No, 12 o'clock, and then it went through the city. By 2 o'clock it was on the bridge at Lambeth Bridge, and we were there for a while, and then eventually the rest of the group decided to leave. We as health professionals thought we really should use this opportunity to really bring the message home about the health impacts of climate change. So and there was lots of press around, and we had the former editor of the British Medical Journal was there as well. So we felt it was a unique opportunity for us to get through that this is a health issue and we need to stop financing fossil fuels. So we stayed on the bridge in a protest, and very shortly after that the police cleared the bridge. They institute what's called a Section 14, which is they have these powers to say you must leave an area, you mustn't protest, or you must move somewhere else or whatever. But they said, no, you've got to get off the bridge, and there was a very short time frame that we had to make this unique protest as we had.
And when they put in that order, that section 14 order, what was going through your head at that point? Did you want to get off the bridge? Were you thinking that was more reason to stay, or?
It's such a dilemma, isn't it? So this is the tension that you have within these situations. So the police officer, his view was, or the intelligence that he'd had, was that there was disruption to traffic in London. We were on the bridge Sunday afternoon around 5 o'clock. We're looking at each end of the bridge and there's no disruption particularly. We couldn't quite rationalise that. We felt this was such an important point. And so you have this clash of ethical dilemma, the wider people with the issue of now I've got to get on my journey, now I've got to do this, I've got to do that, against the longer term thing. You think, oh my goodness, the government is funding fossil fuel chaos for our children and our grandchildren, and we want to bring this message out. And there's this ethical tension in there, isn't there? And yes, we're sorry we caused disruption, but without disruption, we just feel our voice is never heard. You don't get the message out there. Yeah. So 1 million people marked against the Iraq War, and Tony Blair and his friends just went straight ahead with it. Marches don't work, petitions don't work, nothing else works. So this is a way of raising the voice, and we believe that it's really, really important.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like it's in the public conversation a lot, disruption over protests, especially with Just Stop Oil and groups like that. Do you ever worry that it might go too far, or that it might turn people away from the message? Or
it's a challenge, isn't it? It's trying to understand that, and people say, oh, we agree with your cause, but we don't like your methods. And you're thinking, okay, so you agree with the cause, fine. Well, what other methods are there that you know about? So some people say, well, you can vote. Okay, great. Good. Next election, 2 or 3 years' time ticks away, more fossil fuel emissions. That's not going to work. And elections are this package deal. You're voting on a package of things, not just one issue, whereas protest is one issue. So the dilemma there is how you create the conversation, and what else creates conversation within ordinary people and also within our politicians, and that's. Yeah, this is got to be the most effective way that I know, and I'd love to hear if anybody else has got any other bright ideas. And also, what are other people doing? I'm out there and I'm putting myself on the line, and I'm just wondering, people are sitting in their armchairs saying, "Oh, I agree with your message, but not your protest method." Well, what are you doing? Where are we going? Because we're going. Climate change is getting worse, and it's getting worse, and I'm desperately concerned about it. I'm an older guy, but when they say, when we get to 10 years' time, we might be hitting 1.5. Well, that's when climate tipping points kick in, and then we've no idea what's going to happen. Now we've got to do it this decade. We have to cut our emissions, and so we need every which way of everybody putting that message out there. So that's. I suppose when you're saying about the disruption, it's that, oh my goodness, it's jumping up and down. It's our way of jumping up and down. Although, to be fair, we were sitting down rather than jumping.
Yeah, and then you mentioned the health risks that come with climate change. Would you just be able to talk a bit about what about being a doctor made you want to go out and protest? Why your identity as a medical professional and a protester are so closely linked?
So I worked for a number of years in Tanzania at a hospital in rural Tanzania, and when you work in a situation like that, you really, really become aware that it's things outside the hospital that influence health. The housing, the water, clean water supply, your quality of food, whether you've got mosquito nets, these kind of things. In Britain, we just think, our health is just because the wonderful NHS, but in fact, it's our food supply. And people are feeling the pinch now, aren't they? They're feeling the pinch of being able to heat their homes because of the cost of fuel, and they're feeling the pinch of the cost of food. And so we've got food banks and things like that. So the climate change is affecting things like that. So it's affecting food supply. We've had a heat wave in England, Europe, India, China, Southern America, all in the same year. So all the crops across there, the production is down. Food prices go up. Okay, so as climate change gets worse, it's going to get worse. So what happens is that we saw very much in Tanzania where we were in a rural area. The people who were more able when the crunch hit and there was a food crisis and there was a famine, the more able people moved away, and the people who were less well off, less able, they ended up bearing the brunt of the crisis. And I just think this is going to be the same thing in Britain. The people who are insulated by having lots of money are fine, but the people that I worked with, in inner city Salford, down in Ordsall, I mean, they don't have that buffer of the finances. And then we've got the whole issue about if things do get really crazy, what happens to law and order, what happens to our society, where do we get our food from, as I mentioned, and so on. So it's really, really concerning. And so I really feel that it's a health issue and it's a health It's a health inequalities issue. We talk about that it hits the less well off worst. So it's hitting the poorest people right now in Africa, and in Pakistan they're under floods, in Nigeria they're under floods. It's hitting the poorest people now abroad, but it's going to obviously impact the poorer people in Britain as the crisis evolves.
And how long were you a GP in Salford for?
So I was there 17 years in the practice in Ordsall, where it was great. I had a lovely practice, and I loved the patients there, and we got on really well. And then I was a member of the board of the clinical commissioning group, the sort of like the health authority in Salford. I was there for 4 years as well. Yeah.
And did you see any of these early effects of climate change affecting people in Salford, or do you think that's something that's still to come?
So at the minute, so when the big heat wave hit this year, I'd already retired from clinical practice, so I wasn't working in the practice. But I have heard from other colleagues situations. Say you're an elderly person and you hadn't drunk enough, so you get up and you feel dizzy and you fall and you can't get up. And then, of course, you don't drink, and then so on, and then you get into renal failure and so on. So there are problems, there are real problems that are happening right now in Britain. And we know the death rate in Britain this year, because of the heat wave, was higher. Several thousand patients extra died during the heat wave this year. So it's happening right now in Britain.
And so if you are a Salford resident and you're worried about your health, whether that's climate change related or because of the many other issues, the cost of living crisis, is there anything you'd say to a Salford resident, any advice or anything you'd like them to know in terms of...
So I looking forward as time's going on, and we can see the climate crisis evolving, and we're going to, as we said, we're going to hit these shocks, these severe heat waves or rainfall or whatever, so severe climate events, and we've got the food shortages and things like that, and then even potentially the health service, St Thomas's Hospital this summer, the IT system melted and they couldn't function because they didn't have any IT because it was so hot here. So we can have these impacts going on around us, but the really great thing, so Salford is a great place for community networks, and I think that's number one, is to keep working. Down in Ordsall, we've got the Ordsall Community Cafe, real centre of the place there, and a number of other networks going on. So relationships is really important. The next thing I think is people got to start growing food, got to learn how to grow food and start learning, because you can't just think tomorrow I'll plant a seed and you'll have a lovely crop. You have to learn how to manage it and how to get the best out of it. So I'd love to see every single child grow a veg each year and cook it and eat that particular veg that they've grown. Wouldn't it be brilliant that we build that sustainability and that we use the spare land for that? And then we need to keep badgering the council to do the insulation of homes and to try and cut the fuel bills and to keep our houses warmer and so on. And then lastly, which is really the important thing, is make your voice heard. I mean, speak to your MP or write to your MP or get on a march or do some campaigning, because it's critical that everybody's voice is heard, because you have a few people like me banging on about it, it's fine, but really what we've got at the minute is that our government, and in fact governments across the world, seem to be gripped by the fossil fuel industry and the big finance, and they are demanding it. So this COP27 that's happened in Egypt, there were 600 fossil fuel representatives there. That's 25% more than there were in Glasgow last year. And basically, they were there lobbying and wheeling and dealing and basically blocking progress. So our politicians now are wanting to invest in new fossil fuels. So my goodness, how can we break that grip that the fossil fuels and finance have got? And the only way is people power. I can't see any other way. It's people power. We've got to get out there and we've got to make our voice heard. Otherwise, they're just going to take us down this road. Yeah.
Amazing. And then just back to your own personal story. So when you were on that bridge, were you arrested in the end, or?
Yes, there were about 30 of us on the bridge, and we were there, and the police instituted the Section 14, and then they told us that they would be making arrests. So we felt that this was. Some of us felt that no, we don't want to get pushed by the system anymore. The system is. The police are basically the handmaidens, and I call it the system of the government that's taking us down this road. We wouldn't be there protesting if the government was making sensible decisions about fossil fuels, but we decided to make a stand, so 7 of us were arrested. Yeah, so when you're arrested in that situation, we're taken to the local police station, and we were released in the early hours of the morning, pending investigation, and later on we appeared in court just last week.
So how long were you in? Were you at the police station for?
So I was released in about 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, so that was from 5:30.
And during that time, how were you feeling? Were you scared, or was it
So I fully accept, for somebody like me, white middle class person, I can be arrested and not feel I'm putting myself in too much of a danger place. So I fully accept that that's something that I can do. And so it's not nice. You're locked up in a cell without any windows, and you're lying there wondering, what are you doing? And it's a time of self-reflection about what is this. But I have to say that I felt that it was right. It was right to sort of make that stand against it.
And just quickly, as an aside, I mean, I find it interesting that as a doctor you make an oath to help people, to do no harm. Do you see protesting and disruption? Do you see it as an extension of that, or is it two separate things?
So I suppose it's how you frame your role, isn't it? So if you frame your role just somebody's got a cough, you dish out some tablets or some, you in a purely we call it biomedical role, the sort of model of the body as a machine. But if you see somebody within the context within their living, and then if you see those public health impacts, the impacts of housing, water, economy, and so on. We've got to say that this is a bigger picture, and that's me in Tanzania. I saw the bigger picture. I did study some public health as well. I got a master's in public health, and it just opens your eyes. We need to advocate for change to help the system. So for me, it's got to be. You've got to say up. And in the General Medical Council, my governing body, my professional governing body, there's a line in there where the doctor has a duty to help and protect the people, the patients, and the public. So it is my duty as a doctor to protect the public. And at the minute, the only way that I know to protect us against climate change is for me to protest. And I suppose it's a challenge for all doctors to say, how are they obeying that?
Amazing, yeah. And then you go to court over this, and then just recently the court found that you weren't guilty. How did that feel, getting that verdict?
So it was a very moving court case. So we had, as I mentioned, there were 7 of us, and the defence brought the police officer in, and he was interviewed about how he had instituted it, how he progressed it, and then we were watching the body-worn camera footage of the police officers, and it's really weird seeing yourself being arrested and talking to the police officer there. And then it was amazingly moving to hear the testimony of 7 different doctors, some who've worked abroad, some who've worked in this country, a psychologist, a nurse, GPs, a consultant obstetric doctor. And just hearing their personal journeys, what they've done in their personal lives to, standing for the Green Party, campaigning, changing their personal habits, but yet needing to feel that they're part of this. So we heard these testimonies, and then we were sitting there waiting while the judge went out and he was deliberating his case, and we weren't quite sure what way to go. So he came back and said that in his view, the way that the police had instituted the Section 14 was inappropriate, wasn't following the proper procedures. So he said that there was no case to answer because we were acquitted. So he didn't need to go on to the issue about proportional, this dilemma, the proportionality issue about whether the right to protest, which is enshrined in European law, which we still follow in Britain, the right to protest overweighed the rights of the community, and that dilemma was needed because we were released. So it was a relief, huge relief, I have to say. Yeah, I didn't have to pay a fine, and also I don't have to, I did tell the General Medical Council about my case, and I was able to inform them that I've now been released.
And what would a guilty verdict have meant for you? What would the punishment be? So
if I'd been found guilty, my understanding the maximum fine is £2,500, and then I have to inform the General Medical Council and my GP performing governing body, that I had been arrested, and then it is up for them to make a decision on what happens. So clearly, you are a professional, and within that professional standing, you need to behave in a professional way. So I was trying to behave in a professional way, but they may take a different view and may. So ultimately, they can strike me off. I don't think they'd have done that for this case, but we.
Okay, and then just a couple of personal questions. I mean, when you retired in March, did you imagine that a month later you would be arrested in a police station, or?
So you may remember COP26 that was in Glasgow, and there was huge hopes. This is the COP that was coming straight after the COVID pandemic, and the huge hopes were riding on it. And COP26, it was just another failure, another procrastination, putting things off, kicking the can down the road. So I resigned from the CCG board at the end of January, and then I resigned from the practice at the end of March. And I did it in order to do more protest. So really, it's an enabling way. So I'm still doing a role at Greater Manchester, trying to improve, working a day a week in that, trying to improve sustainability in general practice, trying to reduce the environmental impact of our GP practices. But I needed to have a bit more space to do a bit more of the protest. So it was fully determined. Yeah, I was on that road, shall we say.
Fair enough. And so you've retired as a GP now. Have you retired from protesting, or? So
we've had another COP27 in Egypt, and there is no change in the outlook. So within 80 years' time, by 2100, we will see us reaching 2.7 degrees, which is that's the current trajectory. We've made some changes. We've got more windmills and things like that, but the fossil fuels will just keep piling up. So we're going up and up and up instead of cutting the fossil fuel emissions. So we are heading towards this absolute disaster. I attend a church down at the other end of Didsbury, which is one of the oldest churches in Manchester. So it's about 800 years old. And I was reflecting the other day. So we've had society in Britain over 800 years worshipping that church, and over the next 80 years, so in 1/10 of that time, things are going to go crazy, potentially, unless we do something different. And so I just feel that I can't. There's a verse in the Bible that says the love of Christ compels me. So this is the thing. My love of nature, of people, of Africa, my love of my children, my hopes for the future, for everybody. I can't not do something, and so I must do something, and therefore I will be back there.
Okay, safe to say we'll see you back protesting, disrupting.
So I will be back protesting. How and when I do disruption, or how we do it, So Extinction Rebellion has a number of tactics. I don't know, you may have seen even this week, some of my colleagues were down gluing themselves to a bank window saying, JP Morgan, you are still funding fossil fuels. Other people were down at the government offices. Other people were down at Schellenberg, the company that's supplying and funding some of the infrastructure and fossil fuels. At INEOS, the people buying all the licenses for the fossil fuels. So there's a whole range. Our society's trapped in this web. And indeed, each of us individuals. I mean, I live in a home and I've got a gas boiler. I'm doing my best. We've got scaffolding up at the minute trying to put our cavity wall insulation in. We're all on a journey trying to cut our emissions. But, well, we should all be, I suppose. How can we cut our emissions by half by 10 years? That's what science says. We have to halve our emissions within the next 10 years. Where are we going?
Perfect. And then final question from me. You mentioned earlier about how we should be, campaigning and asking local councils like Salford Council to help with insulating homes and, making sure that houses are more eco-friendly. Do you feel like Salford Council's doing enough on that front, or?
So I have to say that I did have attended a number of meetings. They've got I forget what they call it, but it's basically a climate change kind of committee, and they're working on it, which I'm really, really impressed by. So well done, Salford. That's great. I feel that and the government has just recently announced that they're providing $6 billion to help do some insulation. So God willing, some of that funding will come through to Salford Council and enable that. And it's even at Greater Manchester level. So I was at the Green Summit where Andy Burnham there was talking about lots of ideas that he's got. Trying to look at energy production and the Mersey and things like that. Lovely ideas. But time is running out. We're running short. We must keep the pressure on them. We can't just say, oh, somebody else will sort it. We as the people need to use our people power. So yes, Salford, good stuff. But keep the pressure on. Keep asking your councillors what's happening every time you meet them. Because this is the thing that's, there are a number of other issues that we've got in society. We've got Black Lives Matter. We've got gay rights. We've got gender equality rights. We've got a whole bunch of stuff. We've got energy issues. We've got cost of living, and so all of these things would be multiplied in the context of the climate crisis because it will be more challenging to live. So we need to try and control that as best we can to help us deal with these other things in a sensible way.
Perfect, thank you very much. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss, or are you happy?
No, I thank you for this opportunity, and it's really great that you're taking the time to do it, because we sometimes feel that it's not only the politicians that are enthralled by the fossil fuel industry, but sometimes it's the media as well, and it's really super that Salford now is saying, no, we're going to talk about this, because as soon as we start talking about it with me to you, people talking in their families, start breaking the silence, because we've got this sort of blanket of silence. Oh, climate change, oh, that's really terrible. Okay, let's start talking about it. Well, we know we're going into a climate change. It's here now, it's happening now, and it's going to get worse. What are the things that are going to sustain us through that? How can we make sure that we as a people, as a community, as a neighbourhood, as a network, get us through? What values do we want to bring forward? So yeah, let's talk about it. So it's super that you're doing this and bringing the conversation out.
Thank you very much. That's great. Cheers.